Before we go forward, I just want to call attention. We are blessed to have in our presence a couple of representatives of local government here, and I just want to call attention to City Councilman Lathan Watts from the city of Louisville, and I believe is it John McGee? Yes.
I don't think he's not here.
He's not here.
I'm Billy.
Billy, okay, sorry, Bill. Welcome from the city of Highland Village. We're delighted to have you here. Was there any other city representatives that snuck in without me knowing it? Okay, good. Well, we really appreciate you coming out and being part of this gathering together. So, I am going to do something very risky. I'm going to tell you a joke. Now, jokes are very, very culturally based. And if you don't get it, it's okay. But if you do get it, I hope you can, you feel free to laugh. Okay, this is one of my favorite jokes. It goes like this. There is a Jewish guy sitting in a bar. And he's sitting there, and then a Chinese person comes in and sits next to him. And the two of them are sitting there drinking. And then finally, the Jewish guy turns around, looks at the Chinese person, fists him, and bam! Knocks him right off his chair. And the Chinese guy is lying on the floor, he's shaken, he's knocked over, and he looks up at the Jewish guy and he says, "Why did you do that to me?" And the Jewish guy says, "That's for Pearl Harbor." And the Chinese guy says, "Pearl Harbor? That was the Japanese, not the Chinese." And the Jewish guy says, "Chinese, Japanese, what's the difference?" Right? So the Chinese guy gets up and he sits in his chair and he sits there for a little bit, and then after a few moments, bam! Knocks the Jewish guy off of his bench. And the Jewish guy sits up and he says, "Why did you do that?" And the Chinese guy says, "That was for the Titanic." And the Jewish guy looks at him and says, "Titanic?" And the Chinese guy says, "Iceberg, Goldberg, what's the difference?" I love this joke. This is one of my favorite jokes. And I love it for two reasons. First of all, it makes the Jewish guy look stupid, which not a lot of Jewish jokes do, but that's good, and it's because there's plenty of impulsive and foolish Jews out there. But the other reason I love this joke is because it highlights the foolishness of lumping things together, of holding people responsible for something else someone else did wrong, just because they share a trait or a characteristic in common. The Chinese and the Japanese are surely both Asian, but that doesn't mean that one has any connection to the war acts committed by the other. Some Jews and floating ice may have certain things in common, but the one being responsible for the trouble caused by the other is absurd. We have something similar that happens in our society right now. It seems to have become fashionable and permissible, for example, to hold all Muslims responsible for what has gone on, done by a group of Muslim extremists on 9/11. This guilt by association of holding 1.5 billion people responsible for the actions of a few would be funny also, were it not for the serious consequences. Like the joke, fists have been clenched and people have been hurt, but there is little humor or moral instruction that comes from this kind of reaction. This kind of group vilification can happen to any of us, and has happened to us. Certainly we Jews have felt that impact of being judged because we are held in suspicion of doing something that we didn't do. And this happens when we perceive people as abstract and remote groups, driven by perverse teachings, people alien to us and to our human experiences. That is why this evening is so important. This is a moment when we get to sit next to each other like two guys in a joke. But instead of leaping to combat, we sit down and we talk with one another. We talk about our institutions and our traditions so that they and we do not seem so alien after we are done. Truth of the matter is, We are already sitting together. We are side by side in this society, in our schools, in our workplaces, in our places of leisure. To continue to pretend that we know what is in the hearts of others when we don't even bother to get to know who's sitting next to us is a tragedy, and it's inexcusable. That doesn't mean that we as people of religion don't have some work to do. I'll be absolutely frank with you. The complaints of our critics are right. The sacred scriptures of all of our people contain verses that sanction violence, whether it be for self-defense or war, and in truth it is not difficult from any of our scriptures to construe those passages in ways that permit and endorse radical violence, even terrorism. But there are also passages that encourage us to peace, to reconciliation, and to coexistence. And in the end, I do not believe that the problem rests with our scriptures. It does not rest within our tradition, but it rests within our human hearts. We must choose what we think God requires of us. It is we who choose to walk the paths of darkness or light. Our Jewish tradition teaches as much. The teaching of God is in our hands, and it is our power to decide how to apply them to ourselves and to one another. This is coming up in Jewish scripture. Next week, our Torah portion from the book of Deuteronomy is entitled Netzavim in Hebrew, which means standing together. And our teacher Moses, Alav HaShalom, may he rest in peace, reiterates all the teachings of God and then places it in the charge of the people around him. You can do it, Moses says. And then it concludes with our teacher Moses telling the assembled people, I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Choose life, that you may live well and long in the land. The words of God are with us. We can use them as we will. But if we truly want to honor the Holy Blessed One, then what we must choose is to use them for blessing and not for cursing other people, for life and not for death. If we do that, then I think we truly honor our traditions. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us tonight. It is a true blessing for us to have you in our midst.